Hello, everyone. Welcome to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. And this is the Going Bold Wednesday. Going Bold. Woo!
So much enthusiasm.
I like that. Yeah.
What's going on, Cece? How are you?
Well, we're on the Boy and Girl Thing show, and I am Cece Shatz. I am the Doyenne of relationship building. I'm a divorce, dating, and a life coach. And I
Absolutely.
have my good friend here with me, Dr. Christopher Salute.
And as I'm getting dressed for the show,
And he's getting dressed for the show. Now we can see all the stuff that he goes through.
it's been that kind of a day. I've been crazy busy. I was getting ready to be on the show, and I heard a crash in the back of my house. So I investigated for the past 20 minutes. I don't even know what it is. I can't figure out what crashed. So I think it's put all my jewelry on.
Yeah. But so, I know, Christopher, you don't like to blow your horn, but you are an MBA, a PhD, a CEO, a life and a relationship coach.
Yes,
And
ma'am. Yes,
just so
ma'am.
the audience knows that you kind of know your stuff.
Thank you
So,
for blowing my horn for me. And that I mean that in the most PG rated way you can possibly say that.
yeah. So tonight we're going to talk about something that's really kind of a hard subject. We're going to talk about the 5 stages of grief.
Absolutely.
You know.
And as I'm sharing the show, so here's my question to you, Cece.
Yeah.
What are the 5 stages of grief?
Well, that is an excellent question. I'm so very glad that you asked.
we didn't practice this either. We didn't practice.
No. So the 5 stages of grief is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance.
Now I want to talk to you about that a little bit, because when I did some research today, I actually saw a couple of different grids that said 7 stages of grief. And you in your research, did you ever see anything between the 5 and the 7?
Yeah, and I think what it is, it's kind of adds a little bit about the transition that you make, so we can go over that. It says shock and denial, pain and guilt, anger and bargaining, depression, the upward turn, and that's what I'm saying as you start doing this, a bit of a transition, reconstruction, and working through acceptance and hope.
Okay, got it. So that makes a ton of sense. So I know that this show came about, and as I'm sharing, I'm actually sharing this on all my platforms, and I apologize because you know that I want to be with you, but it really only works when we share it live.
Hey, Graham.
Hey, Graham, what's going on? It works better when we share the show live. So when I share it, like even 5 minutes or 2 minutes before the show, it just doesn't share as well. Like it doesn't translate as well.
Well, what happens is if you share it, too early, then people that you share it with are already gone or whatever. And so when it's live, and they go, oh, let me listen. So yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So
let me just share this real quick.
So I think the first thing we have to say about this, okay, he agrees. He agrees with you. All right, let's not start that, Graham. Don't be starting to agree with Chris right off the bat.
We got one.
Oh my gosh, it's like, holy smokes. But what I was going to say about grief is that we talk about these various stages, and the reality is that no one stage is the first stage, right? So it can be any different stage can come up for you first.
Now, is that correct? Is that I don't know that enough to be true. I mean, we studied this in like Psych 101, so I don't, you know what I mean? Like I don't remember this, but is that the thing?
Yeah. I mean, it can come up at the different stages. I mean, you probably will eventually go through all of them, but they might come at different times. You might be angry at the first, right?
Right.
You may not be at the denial. You may be angry, and denial might be mixed in within that. The other thing is that a time frame. Often we think, okay, somebody said out there that depending on, if we're talking about divorce, it depending on how long you were married, just so you times that by how many months, and this is all the time. The calculation is this how long it's going to take you to get through that loss. But the reality is that's hogwash. I mean, it's your personal relationship that you have, what you're experiencing personally is how it's going to take place for you. So It
Okay.
could be a shorter period than someone else. It could be a longer period. It's whatever is going to work for you.
That
And
makes
then
sense.
also the reality is that you may experience grief at the beginning, right? You may experience that and you may start feeling better and you may start making that transition and walking through to the other side of it. But something may trigger you that will bring you back again to realize some of those feelings that maybe you haven't actually experienced, to go through, or they resurface those feelings. So that's something to need to know, because a lot of people think that, okay, well, it was a long time ago, I shouldn't be feeling the way I am. Well, sometimes you are. And I hear this a lot when, let's say you have a divorce,
Hmm.
or a loss like that, and then you hear the partner has moved on and they're getting married, and then all of a sudden you're flooded again with those feelings, or death or something like that.
Right.
Something triggers those kind of feelings again, and then you kind of have to go through the grief process again.
Now, I'm as I'm listening to you, and I am listening, right? But
Mhm.
millennial ADHD brings me to these other things while I'm listening. I'm seeing 5 stages of grief, 7 stages of grief, 12 stages of grief. But
Mhm.
all of these, and we could talk about all the different stages. All of these tend to, as you just mentioned, have reentry troubles, new patterns, new relationships. So I'm seeing what you're saying in that all of these new things, right? That these new events that come in our life can actually re-trigger that grief process. Now, I guess what I'm wondering is, are you ever then rid of grief? Like, is there ever a place in your the cycle of your relationship or end of your relationship where you can say, I have put this away. There is closure. What is the best way to do that?
Well, I guess if you've moved on, but I think there's always going to be like a pang, so to speak. There's always
Sure.
going to be something. Like when you talk about, often I hear when you talk about your relationship, your marriage, and that you got divorced, and there's always a little bit of a pang there. It's not something that you're going to find yourself in a deep depression over or anything like that, but it still makes you still feel something.
Oh
And the
yeah.
reality is that if we feel, it's a good thing. Can you imagine what your life would be if you didn't feel something?
Well,
So,
so there's
yeah.
a couple of things that I'll say to that. Number one is, you're absolutely right. I mean, so there's a meme that got shared the other day, and I hate that we pop psychologize everything, because as a PhD in psychology, like there are actual principles that we should think about and talk about. But this one actually, has holds some water. Um, there's a meme out there that says, "Once you love, you never unlove. A piece of you will always love someone." And I think if it's true love, I think we tend to, I loved this person, I was in love. Okay, were you in love or were you in lust? And did you find somebody on Tinder or MySpace or whatever you did, or was it a great weekend of wonderful sex? Um, and I'm not looking to invalidate, but ask yourself truly, if it was love, would you want that person's happiness in front of your own? That's love, right? Um, when they say, when you love someone, you will continue to love that person for a lifetime, even if it's just a little bit. And what you're saying really resonates with me, because I think to myself, you've mentioned, right? I talk about my ex-wife. I loved my ex-wife. She's a wonderful person, and you tend to think about those kinds of things later in life. Talk to me about this for a second, because as you said that, I thought to myself, well, as I'm retelling myself the story of my own marriage, do I have rose-colored glasses on? Am I telling a story to myself whereby I'm only remembering certain parts of that relationship, and am I re-falling in love with something that wasn't there? Is that part of the grief process, or is that another show?
Well, I mean, I don't think that's part of the grief process. I think that that's something that we do as we move forward and we start making that transition. And what you're doing is, and when we're going through the grief process, a lot of times when we go through anger and things like that, we're pulling up, negative things, right, about our exes and things like that. And or we're mad at them for leaving us, if it's a death or something like that. And so we might be going over some negative things.
Yeah.
But when we move forward, we have the freedom to be able to remember some of the pleasant things that happened in our lives and some things that we're grateful for to be able to share. Like for instance, I think a lot about, the travels that I've experienced in my life. I would not have probably have ever done that. I don't know if it wasn't for my ex, so some things that I am very grateful for. Then there's other things that I'm never going to forget because they were
Sure.
very painful to me.
Right.
And because of those things, I have now set up boundaries in my life that if someone comes into my life and they do certain things, I don't have the rose colored glasses anymore. I've created those boundaries for me. But let's talk about love a little bit because I think that that's an important issue as we go through grief, right? Because sometimes we will, especially if it's a loss of someone, we will kind of embellish that love, so to speak, right? We put
Tell
that
me more about that.
individual on a pedestal. We kind of inflate that love. Then when we want to move forward into another love, we've got that one up on a pedestal, and we can't get
Yes.
the other love to get to that far, get up there. But the reality is each individual that we meet, whether it be a true love experience or whether it be a true partner experience or friendship or whatever, we love people at different places in our lives, at different times, different degrees, different ways. And so we have to know that we can love more than one person in our life, and that's okay. We're not being disloyal to another person that we might have loved if we love someone else, because we could be loving them totally different. So we
Love that.
have to think about it. We're not the same person as we were with our past relationships as we are today. So we have to know that we can move forward and love someone in a different way that's suitable for us at the time period we're in.
And that's important to know. And if you're on Instagram, by the way, I want to thank you for coming on. We're probably going to exit in a second, but we forgot to mention, and we probably should have. The Boy and Girl Show is a show mostly about love, dating, and relationships. So when we're talking about grief, we're not talking about grieving a pet, grieving a parent, grieving a sibling, grieving a cousin, grieving an aunt. We're talking about grieving a loved one, right? Which is a very different grief process, right? Because you mentioned moving on to another relationship. I lost my mother when I was 5. There's no other mother, right? Like I had a stepmother, we had a live-in maid, my grandmother came to live with us. My aunt was and continues to be a mother-like figure. There was no one to replace that person. I didn't have a new relationship to replace that. So when we talk about the grief process, we're talking about a loved one specifically. And I want to, for a second, before we exit Instagram, you can go right on my story though and come watch us on YouTube. Elena says, after 3 years of back and forth, I can't wait to divorce. There will not be a trigger because because after these 3 years, everything that was between us got lost. I respect him a lot. It's been 15 years, but there's no love anymore. I mean, that's your relationship, right? I will say that even after some of the most horrific breakups in my time, I remember certain people and certain events fondly. What are your thoughts on that, Cece? We're gonna go.
Well, okay, let's take it back because the reality is one of the processes that we have to go through as we're moving through grief is is the loss of the relationship we thought we were going to have, right?
Okay.
And so we've envisioned this perfect relationship or this perfect scenario of a relationship or a perfect lifetime together, and then that partner dies. We're grieving not only the individual themselves, but we're grieving and the relationship where it's died there on whatever that day was. But we're also grieving what we thought we were going to have, right? If we wanted to have children or grandchildren, or if we were going to live into our retirement days, or if we saw ourselves on some sort of island or whatever,
Right.
whatever we envisioned our lives, our end of our lives to be, that's we're also grieving that. So it's a process that we go through, but it's a mental stage as we move through those things that we're able to to be able to take with us. And that's why it's so important to know that maybe things are going to trigger you as you continue on with your life. Something may trigger you and you say, oh, they're not here and now I'm alone, and that kind of thing. And you're triggered again a little bit. You experience the grief, maybe not to the extent of when it first happened, but you still are feeling that a little bit,
Yeah.
as you move forward.
Now, I know we've got some comments. I had a question for you, but do you want to take some comments before I ask my question?
Yeah, we have a whole bunch here from Graham, so I'm going to kind of flip through them real quick.
And I think Elena came over to YouTube, which is great.
Yeah, and he said, as I mentioned earlier, Cece Shatz, we went through this. He had a recent death with a friend just this weekend, so that experienced that. We cut through a lot of stages by learning about life after death, and that really helps ease us through those stages. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yes, I feel there is the end to grief.
You do. I'd like to learn more about that.
Because you know you will be reunited. So sometimes those that are traveling through grief, they feel that comfort that they can move through grief because they know that it's not the end, that they are going to be united someday. Yeah. So therefore your grief is a little eased. That is moving forward, and acceptance of the past has no longer a hold upon you. And thank you, Graham, for making all those comments, because we really do appreciate it. And then she's saying, I will stay here.
Okay, so that was Elena from Instagram coming over to YouTube, which is great. And if you're on TikTok, you're welcome to come to YouTube as well. So you head over. It's weird. Head over to my Instagram, find the story. It's right on YouTube. You can comment there. We're talking about grief of either a loved one when there's a death, or the grief of the loss of a relationship. And it's interesting because I pulled up a great article from the Cleveland Clinic, which is a fantastic. Normally, a lot of the articles I pull up are like love.net or whatever, but this is at Cleveland Clinic's a pretty well-respected news and report journal. But the other thing that I thought interesting when Graham brought up, the reuniting process, right? Mm-hmm. He said to us, you have this comfort in knowing that when you pass, you'll be reunited with your person. And it's funny because we were going to talk about faith during this conversation as well. And if you're a person of faith, it's likely that you believe in some sort of an afterlife. And the first thing I think of is one of the most beautiful scenes and movie kind of things that I ever think about. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, likely not, Cece, because it's like a guy movie, is Gladiator. Have you ever seen Gladiator?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, so you have. Oh, cool. Mm-hmm. And it's all about, right, he wants to get vengeance for his family, but at the end, what he really wants is to just die after that, so that he can be reunited with his wife in the afterlife. And I thought to myself, what a beautiful man. And I don't know that many folks think like that anymore. What do you think?
Oh, I think they do. And that's why we have a tremendous amount of suicides when relationships end. So
that's true. That's true.
So, I mean, I think we do. And it's a shame because you have so much more life that you could share with someone, that you could do more meaningful things here on earth.
Absolutely.
To end it. So I want to make sure that, people understand that life is, I don't really understand why things happen the way they do, but I just want those out there to know that it's not the end of something. It could very well be the beginning of something else. Absolutely. And even though it's sad to think that this person that you love so much is now no longer in your life, but it could be something new is on the horizon for you to experience. So, as we move through the stages of grief, acceptance is one of those things, and acceptance to move on, acceptance to know your purpose in life, acceptance to know your value of what you can give to other people. There's many people that have suffered great losses who have gone on and touched millions of lives through service and work and devotion. So, it's not the end of something. It could very well be the rebirth of something else. And so, we want to think about that. We've got tons of coming in.
Oh, good. Lots of comments.
Subject. So Graham says the original, not the Motor,
Oh, I'm talking about the new version of Gladiator.
or maybe saying modern version.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know which Gladiator you've watched, Graham. I don't know. Let's see
Okay.
what Megan
Do
says.
you think as a society we have a tendency to jump into new relationships before we give ourselves time to grieve the loss of past ones? Yes, absolutely. And what I'd like to say to that, and I'm sorry, Christopher, for jumping in, because this is
No,
kind of
you
my
do you.
specialty because I'm a divorce expert. And so the reality is it's not so much that we have given ourselves time to grieve, we haven't given ourselves time to heal, right?
Right.
And create an individual, create a person that's ready to move into the world, and join maybe someone else in life. And so we want to give ourselves that space and that time to heal as we move forward. And also I think it's an honoring of maybe of someone that you lost. If it's if it's a widow or death, that type of thing, you want to give yourself some space to also honor that individual as you move forward and learn more about yourself. Because I was talking with someone today. Herb actually runs a widows group, and him and I were talking today, and we were talking about how the gentlemen were moved quickly because they're alone, right? They're very, very lonely, and they're not giving themselves the time or the space to be able to really kind of heal from the loss and then move into another relationship. But the reality is they're not who they were when they first got married, right? They're not they've grown a great deal, and maybe they need to know more about themselves as they've grown. Because when you're together with someone that you truly love, your life is shared with the expectation or with the will of trying to make the other person happy, right? Not always focused on yourself, but trying to have them happy. You want to do things for them because you love them, right? You're not thinking centered on yourself. So when you have a loss of someone, it's time for you to start thinking about yourself. What is it that you truly like to do? What is it that you want to achieve in this next part of this next chapter of your life? What are your ways of moving forward? What you want to embrace? And so you got to give yourself some space and time to be able to allow yourself to be a little bit one-on-one. Get to know yourself a little bit.
Yeah, no, I 1000% agree with that. And Megan, you and I have talked about this quite a bit, and I think it's important to note too that, what here's what I'll say. I'll say that widowed people, in my experience, both coaching and in other types of experience, I think they tend to take the time a little bit longer to heal and to mourn and to grieve. And the reason that I think that is because their relationship didn't end on bad terms, right? Usually, right? It was a flourishing, growing relationship, and then the loss happened. I tend to find, as Elena had mentioned, when there's a breakup, we'll tend to see folks move into relationships pretty quickly, and I tend to see it in the younger generations more so than the older generations as well. And to Cece's point exactly is that we don't see people taking the time to heal. And what winds up happening is, I just did a TikTok on this, and I do TikToks on this very often, is people go, get out there, go, get into another relationship, go on another date. Here's the thing. Number one, terrible idea for you, because you need to heal, you need to grieve, you need to mourn, you need to do all these things, number one. Number two, have you thought about across the table, there's like a human being who thinks there's a shot at something, and they're your plaything to like feel good for the night. You know what I mean? So that's not, in my opinion, the best way to handle any type of grief or any type of mourning or any type of loss. To Cece's point, you need to look within and you need to heal and go through those stages yourself before you move into anything else. Am I off base here, Cece? Am I on?
Well, I'm never going to say you're off base, but I don't necessarily agree with you. And the reason being is because although I appreciate and I understand the loss and the pain that goes through when you have lost someone through death, because it's so final, right? Through that individual, it's so very final. But I don't want to displace anyone's feelings as to what is more painful or who could move through faster.
Sure.
If it's divorce, because there's a lot of individuals that are going through the death of their relationship that it's taken them by surprise, or that, it's hard for them to come back because they've spent 30 some years or 40 some years with someone, and they just, to them, it's like a death, a total death.
Right.
And so I think we really have to take the grieving process individually, break it down per individual as to what are you experiencing, how are you feeling, and what is going through, those kind of things. And with coaching and things like that, you start to understand that a little bit more. But it is so, and I hate to use the word wrong, but it is so injustice to the individual to make them think that, well, you had a death, so you should be able to grieve longer than a divorced person, or say that to the divorced person, you should grieve longer. Because the reality is, we have a partner that's left us, right? And on one side, they've left us because with death, they had no choice, right? They became sick or accident or whatever, and there was no choice in it. On divorce, there's a choice. There's a choice to leave. And so then you not only have to deal with the death of it, but then you have to deal with, reconstructing yourself because you've been rejected, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's a whole nother issue. So that is a whole separate thing from the grief itself. Then you have to try to build yourself up from that. So I really like to level it out there for the audience, to let them know that whatever you're experiencing is your own personal experience, and we value that. We understand it and we value it, and no less or no more, whatever it takes for you to move to the other side of that, to make that transition and stepping into your new life, which is going to be a new life you're going to have. We don't want to demean anything of what you're experiencing. So I just want to be careful with that, because that really can hurt people. So, all right, let's do some. We've got a whole bunch of them here. But man has lent more than less aggressive doesn't decrease.
I'm not sure what he's saying there.
One man's manliness. one's manliness. I'm not sure where we were talking about that, about the manliness. Okay. All right, here we go. I grieved my relationship for the past 3 years. I thought so many times I could do anything to bring it back to life, but I guess it's no return. I grieved my dreams of being a mom one day. See, that's what I said. It's like, it's the rejection, the rejection of the loss there. You grieve the dreams. And I think that, to me, I think that is the hardest, maybe the hardest part, is because you love that individual. You'll always have that love for that person, but that the end of whatever that relationship is, what you dreamt that would be, that's the hardest thing to overcome, is that you're not going to have that anymore. And to be able to move through, to tell yourself you have new dreams and new goals and new things that you can share and experience. And so that dream is really hard. That's a real hard thing to be able to move through. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, one of the things that I remember saying to my father, so my mother passed when I was very young, and I'm ashamed of saying this. I had my engagement broken up, and he said, when I lost your mother, and I was grieving, and I was so upset, and he goes, you're going to be okay. And I said, I remember saying this. I said, you didn't have to look at mom every day and feel that loss every day, knowing that she was going to be happy for the rest of her life without you. I regret that, because that's a terrible thing to say to anyone. But at the time, that's what I felt. I felt that there was not just the loss of the relationship, the potential hope for this relationship, but I felt that I would rather just not exist on the planet, or could we exist on two different planets, so that I wouldn't have to see that this person had actively rejected me. And the funny thing is, I had broken up with them, but then tried to get it back. But the point is I think that no matter what the grief and no matter what the loss is, right, there's the way it's going to happen, and there's the way you think it's going to happen, right? So here we're talking about loss of, being a mom one day, dreams and hopes and all these things. And as you mentioned, right, Cece, you're thinking about the potential of the relationship too, which is so, sometimes we tend to even build that up even more so, and that hurts even more because we saw that potential in someone that maybe was there, right, and maybe it wasn't, right, but we thought we were working on something to get to where it was going to go, and then it's taken out from under us. So that creates such a tough thing to have to work on and think about for however long you're thinking about it, however long it takes you to get through those stages.
Yeah, one of the things I hear a great deal when we're doing our coaching is that a lot of them, they say is that they're not the person that they had married, that's not the same person that they're
Sure.
divorcing, and it comes as such a shock to many of them, is that they're like, why didn't I see this? Why didn't I see this shift that's happened in this person? This person is someone that I don't even know. And that's when it becomes very, yeah, I think very eye-opening for you, is to realize that this person is not, when you start realizing that this person that you're divorcing is not the same person that you married, that starts helping you to kind of create that transition. So you realize that, you this is not who you want to be with, right?
Right.
And that's not who I'm going to be seeing on the other side, because I don't think he's going to join me.
Right. That's fair.
Yeah, I don't think the pearly gates are going to be open for him.
That's funny.
But
That's
yeah,
funny.
no, I totally see. Let's see if we have all this. When she says, I guess I arrived at one point where I need to kill this relationship before it killed me. And you know what? I get this, because I will share with you, I experienced this myself. I became very ill. I started losing my hair. I started becoming very sick. And finally, my doctor told me one time, and maybe he shouldn't have said this because it was a turning point for me. He said, if you want to live longer, you may want to think about getting a divorce.
Yeah. Your health.
That's what my doctor said.
Yeah. So Diamonds and Diesel says, to your point earlier when you had mentioned, the person we start loving is not necessarily the person that we end a relationship with. Now, she says, when we love someone, we tend to put blinders on and miss those cues. That's one part of it, right? The other part of it is you always show your best self, right? And those combined, right? Now, that's on the short term, but in the long term, people will grow. Now, you have to remember, are you going to grow in a negative way or in a positive way, right? Now, I'm a person of faith, and I loved this visual that when I did get married, our pastor had said, or our priest and our deacon, they talked about the growth of these trees, and they basically said, look, these trees are going to kind of grow separately, but next to each other and intertwined, and they're not going to shadow each other, and they're not going to hurt each other's growth, but they're going to grow in a way that's going to foster each other's growth, but they are going to grow separately, right? Now, there are a lot of folks that tend to talk about, hey, this was not a good person, the guy, girl, whatever. Sure. Okay. So they grew in a way that was maybe all over the place. But sometimes, right, let's take the good. Sometimes you're just growing, and maybe you're kind of growing this way. And at the end of the day, yeah, you may be divorcing someone or losing someone that really was not your equal or your partner. And that's just okay too, right? So something that I've noted too, and you know this about me, Cece, is that I'm ethically non-monogamous. And so there have been monogamous relationships that I've been in that I realized, and I was like, man, this is just not for me. Or when I moved to Vegas, or when I have a different lifestyle, like the way I spend money, or the way that I make money, or the way that I put my jobs first, those aren't necessarily bad things, but they're just things that disagree with my people, right? To that end, if there are people who kind of grew in other directions, it's like, well, that's okay too, And Diamond says sometimes it's parallel and other times it's chaotic. Yeah, for sure. What are your thoughts on that? And I know we have a ton of comments you have to get to on this side too, Cece.
So, what you're saying is that you get into I'm not sure what the question was, but I lost it.
What I was saying was that sometimes we grow apart in a negative way, meaning somebody's a bad person, right? Or says and does some bad things, but sometimes we just grow apart. And the grieving process, I would imagine, would be different.
Yeah, we see that a lot with individuals who have been married for a long time, right? Uh, and I'll just take a scenario, and may not be any one person, but like let's say, for instance, the wife has been taking care of the family, she's been doing all those kind of things. The husband's been being the breadwinner, he's been bringing in the money, doing all those
Sure.
things that need to be done, and then the kids leave the nest, and it's like, okay, now what do we do? I'm now
Right.
married to a stranger
Right.
because I've been busy with the children, you're busy with work. We haven't come together and we don't even know who each other is anymore. We don't know what, because we don't do a lot of things together. And so, that happens a great deal. And so you see a lot of empty nesters starting to, have relationship problems and divorcing. So you see it more and more. And it's not necessarily like, oh, he wants to go out and get a sports car and he wants to get a younger chick. It's not necessarily that. It's that he doesn't know who she is anymore.
Well,
Because
yeah,
without the kids, he doesn't know who she is.
and that could be that your identity is in raising the children, or it could just be that your identity both are in the family. Because as we see, right, like millennials, I don't know that we're going to have too many. My brother's wife was able to raise their kids for a couple of years, and even she went back to work, and he does
Right.
pretty well. I'm
Mhm.
not going to count his money, but millennials and under, we're not going to see that many house parents, right, like child raising parents. But what we are going to see, I think, is, like you said, that identity in the family. And so when the family leaves the nest and you're with this person now that you were juggling, bringing this kid to taekwondo and this kid to soccer and this kid to ballet, gymnastics, whatever, and now you don't have that functional thing to worry about. It's very challenging to then to kind of refall in love. It would be the same way we see this a lot where wife and husband, or wife and wife, or husband and husband, whatever, as spouses, they build a business together and then they retire.
Mhm.
Maybe they give the business to their kids, or they sell the business, and they're like, well, what do we do now? We used to cook together and we did all these, or we did whatever the business was. Now it's like, what do we do? It's
Right.
very
Or all you share is just business. I will tell you is that my son moved today to Fort Lauderdale from Tampa, so he's
yeah,
going to be like 4 or 5 hours away. And I've been feeling like, oh my gosh, he's so far away. You know what I
right.
mean? I've been feeling like all day long. I've been feeling like, oh, you know, and not that I saw him a lot. I didn't, even though he was, like 15 minutes away. And now that he's 4 or 5 hours away, I feel like, oh, I can't believe he's so far away. So,
Absolutely.
I think that definitely does happen. And you can have couples together that drift apart simply because they have interests, total different interests, right? And so they go to work separately, they have interests separately, and then eventually, sometimes in their lives, they look at each other and say, "Who are you?" You know. So it's like, yeah, that kind of thing. And other people come into play, and stuff just happens. But when we're talking about grief, we're talking about really the pain of being able to, um, you know, to really deal with the loss of that individual. And the key thing with grief is that transition into our new life, And so we all have to know that when grief happens, you can't stay within that parameters of grief forever. You have to start making that transition into your new life, and that's the hard step in order to do. And so, like, how do we do that, right? Those are the things that we want to talk about.
Absolutely. A couple, and you've got a lot of comments there. Let me just read these real quick on TikTok, and then I'll probably get off TikTok for a little bit. So,
Okay.
Diamonds and Diesel says you see a lot of that in movies, the empty nest kind of thing, and it's rooted in truth. No, we don't. We don't see that in millennials, and the economy has a lot to do with it. The nuclear family is not what it used to be one generation ago. That's for certain. And then Megan says, as a divorced mother, this is also relevant and interesting. Diamonds and Diesel says, it took years for me to get over my marriage and to find myself, accept myself, and love myself. I love that you have, and I hate that it took so many years, but it definitely happens. On that note, TikTok, we're going to come back on the next show, so we'll see you in a little bit. But if you want to join our show on YouTube, go on to my Instagram, hit the YouTube link on my story, and join us there. This is probably longer than we usually go, so I'll see you all soon. Bye.
Okay, we've got one here from Mandy. I think it depends on what you are getting from the new relationship. Are you getting love, support from someone when you need it the most? Are you just distracting yourself from reality, from dealing with reality? The reality is if you're not healed from your past relationship, you need to not be stepping into another one. And that's the reality. Because that other person could comfort you, can do all of those wonderful things to make you feel good, but you haven't dealt with the loss of
Yeah.
someone.
And we do that so often, though. So how do we
Mhm.
know, Cece? How do we know that we're healed before we move on?
Well, and sometimes we don't, sometimes we absolutely don't know. And
Yeah.
so we just have to start going through some of the, ask yourself some of these various steps that you've gone through. Have you gone through any of these various different steps? Have you gone through denial? Have you gone through anger? We probably should talk about some of these things and what exactly they are.
Yeah.
Um, you know, uh, Denial is a grief is overwhelming emotion. It's unusual to respond in a strong and often sudden feelings that you're pretending the loss or change didn't happen, isn't happening. So you're denying a lot about, what's going on in your life. You're thinking everything's going to be okay, whatever, and I'm just moving forward, right? So you're kind of doing the denial, doing it that way. So you want to make any comments about denial?
I think we all go through it, right? And I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting distracted because I think there's wind blowing all over my house, and my dog is going crazy. I think we all go through it. It's the I guess my favorite kind of theory that I was or thinking that I was thinking about is when God's testing you, right? Is Are they testing you or are they trying to tell you to quit? And so that happens a lot in relationships where we go, okay, this is just a phase, like we're struggling, we're challenging, but we're gonna get back together. Or is God telling you, hey, this thing's over, kiddo, let it go, move on, find the person that's going to be for you. And a lot of times what I coach is, if you're both struggling and you're both working at it, then I think keep going. But if you see an imbalance there, it shouldn't be that hard, right? Like, move on to someone who's going to put, they say relationships are 50-50. Relationships are 100-100. Yeah, it's a full-time job, right?
Right,
Um,
but if you're struggling with grief because of a death,
well,
then
that's very different.
yeah, so that's very different, and we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge the fact that being a widow is very different than being divorced.
100%,
Yeah.
100%. Well,
So
and I think there, though, my kind of comparison wouldn't apply because God isn't testing you there. It is over, right? So there, the denial phase is probably going to be shorter because there's no one on the other side pulling at you, right? Now
mhm.
you may, and I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of clients, and I know I talk to a lot of folks too who say, I just don't know if I'll love somebody to that point. I don't know if there's somebody for me. Should I just honor my relationship and stay single? And these are valid things to think. But at the end of the day, you got to do what's right for you. And sometimes that does mean moving on and finding your happiness. I know personally, if and when I pass, and if my spouse is still alive, I want them to enjoy their life and enjoy a new relationship. I would feel so silly looking down and thinking that they were honoring me by being single. Honor me by enjoying your life, in my opinion, but they've got their own life to live and they've got to grieve the way they need to grieve as well.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't have to suffer, right? I mean, I think that what you're saying is that, I'm going to lay it down and I'm just going to suffer for the
Right.
rest of my life because I've lost you and there's no need to live anymore. And that certainly is not what you should do. And that is part of the grieving process, is when you recognize that, and then you can change that situation. You can kind of get help and go to a coach and talk to them, or go to a therapist, go to friends, do different things to be able to start changing your environment. I thought Mandy had a really good thing here. She said here about, I'm reminded of a quote: heal
Yes.
first or you will bleed on someone that didn't cut you. And I thought that was really good.
That's one of
Thank
my
you.
favorites. And they one of my other favorites that kind of goes along with that is hurt people hurt people. So when you're hurting, you tend to hurt others. And it may not be on purpose, right? It usually isn't. But
Right.
I know, for example, one of my most toxic things that I used to do, and this is grief or not, right?
Mhm.
When I was in pain, and you and I are, let's say, best friends, Cece, I would want you to comfort me, but I would push you away so hard, and I would need you to fight to come in to get to me, not realizing that you're taking a lot of hits along the way to help me, and that is toxic, right? That's hard. That's
Right,
hard.
because what you're doing is you're using that person.
Right, right. And so
You're using them. You're not building a relationship with them. I mean, if you're building a relationship with someone, it's totally different.
yeah,
But if you have a relationship like that, you're strictly using that person to try to help make you feel better and help
and
you
so
help you get through.
we
There was something
sometimes
I
do
wanted
that.
to say, and I can't remember now. I forget now.
What's that?
I said there was something that I did want to say about.
Oh, go ahead. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, I lost my train of thought. Sorry, old lady. Got it. So anyhow, let's talk about this. Let's see. If I jump now into a new relationship, I know I am healed. When you get respect, attention, love, happiness from someone. Oh, from someone how? Okay, let me. I
There's
do
there's
remember
another part
that.
to that, Cece.
Oh,
Yeah,
how? Oh, how can you keep thinking at the past relationship where you cry all day when you are insecure, when you are unhappy? So, yeah, I will jump in a new one with open arms. Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk
yeah,
about jumping into someone, because I think we
I
all
agree.
need relationships in our lives, right? We all want love, and we all want to give love to someone. We all want that positive energy into our lives. So let's talk about the energy. When you are hurting, when you are not ready to move forward into another relationship, this is what you're going to find. You're going to find all of the ones, all the individuals that are coming into your life are headaches, right? They're not on the level that you truly want to be at. And the reason being is because when you're healing and you're not completely healed yet, your energy level, your vibration is low, right? So you start attracting all of these other people that are going through pain, going through insecurities, going through issues in their life, and you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, why am I getting all the horrible people that are coming, you know, what we call losers, right, into our lives?" And the reason being is because you're not.
Your
You're not
energy
ready
isn't
for that
is
yet.
is not great, right?
Right. So you're not ready for that. So if you're out there and you decide, okay, I'm gonna go for it. I'm just gonna jump into and start dating again and doing all that. And if you're attracting all these, let's call them unsavory individuals that you're
That's
not wanting in your life,
favorite.
and the reason being is because you need to stop for a minute, heal a little bit more, get your focus, as to what it is you truly want in your life and then as you move forward. I think all of us deserve relationships in our lives. We None of us need to be lonely. We don't need to go through life, feeling lonely or anything like that. There is someone else out there for you if you're widowed and you've given yourself time and space in which to heal. There is someone else out there, someone different. Will not be the same individual that you lost, but it's going to be someone that's different. And so you can love them differently, and you could and still have an equally wonderful relationship with them. So I think that that's very important. So anything else you want to say, because we're going to have to close it up here. I
Oh,
hate to
that's
say.
totally fine. I think we had a lot of great comments. Thank you so much for that. And I think maybe we need to do a sequel to this because there were so many.
Yeah, well, it's that people miss it. I think in coaching and in a lot of things that we talk about, they miss the transition. Now, we'll talk about grief, we'll talk about the various stages that you go through, but we lack the transition as we move forward into our lives. And so, we're kind of like on a little teeter totter, that type of thing. We're going in like a little bit of a roller coaster. Sometimes we're up and sometimes we're down, and that's life, right? And
Right.
so we want to talk about those things, and we want to embrace that and embrace our lives. So yeah. Oh, we got some more comments. I love these comments. Thank you. I tried to multiple times to jump into a relationship multiple times, but each time I do, I find myself I need to keep healing. 5 years. I don't know if I'm ready. Well, here's the thing. If you say to yourself, I don't know if I'm ready, guess what? You're not
You're
ready.
not ready.
Yeah. You've got to be able to take baby steps. Now, when we're in the process of that transition, it doesn't mean that we have to shut everything off, but we have to start taking those small baby steps into healing, the small baby steps into the transition of welcoming someone else in our lives. We have to take, small steps in which to make compromises and be, because if we're going to have another relationship, we're going to have to start making compromises in our life. It's not all about us anymore. It's about someone else, right? And so there's
100%.
a lot of things that we have to start thinking about. So I would think maybe you're ready to start taking those baby steps now. And maybe we could start talking about baby steps that we could take as we're moving forward. Graham says, thank you both for doing this show, and to all the viewers who commented,
Thank you,
hugs.
Graham.
And he said, find yourself first, face yourself then, when happier, move forward, not back. Absolutely. So my last comment would be, as we move forward through grief, right? As we move forward through grief, we want to continue looking through the windshield and not through the rearview mirror. And I think that's something
Love
that's
that.
very important. We want to keep building our relationships and continue to make them strong, whole, and healthy for us. And so as we're moving forward, we want to build all different types of relationships, not just, a loving, everlasting partnership, but friendships, various different things, because that leads up to being able to open our hearts up to be able to get into that long-term relationship.
1000%. Love that.
Yeah.
All right, my friend, until next time, don't forget, if you're watching today, check out the barbershop. We're going to be talking about, are you a dominant man or are you a complete jerk? We're going to talk about that in about 10 minutes. So we'll see you soon.
Okay.